Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner. Unfiltered commentary. Not your truth, the real truth. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for your support. Welcome back. I'm going to give you a little preview here and talk about my trip I just came back from. I went from New York, upstate New York, where I live, through Pennsylvania, through West Virginia, through Kentucky, into central Tennessee, and then I went east through Virginia to Virginia Beach, where my daughter's son-in-law and granddaughter live, and then I came back up north through Delaware, Maryland, central Pennsylvania, and I live right above the Pennsylvania border in Binghamton. And it's going to be coming out in the next few days. There's quite a bit of editing involved. A lot of little shots of highway shots, and there's some scenes from the place I stayed in Tennessee. And to give you my thoughts on what I thought of the states, a little bit that I do know, and the people that I've talked to. And sometimes you just have to go with your gut. How people are, how they treat you, how they treat each other. And a lot of the I talked about before is my trip was looking for freedom. And freedom takes on a lot of different, I should say, not disguises, but freedom takes on a lot of different forms. There's freedom amongst each other, where you respect and have manners, civility. You care about what your neighbors are having trouble, you help them out. And freedom also is from taxes. Taxes is also freedom. And people say, well, how is that possible? Well, when you're paying 30, 40, 50, 60% in local property taxes, state and federal taxes, you have to work 4 or 5 months a year for free. And I did that for a long time. As a business owner, I own a convenience store at a Battle Redemption Center. And for 23 years, it was a struggle. Granted, some years were a lot better than others. But the last 4, 5, 6 years have been absolute misery. And I did what I had to do to make it work, and I sold my business. So this is going to be trip 1. I'm taking another trip later this summer. This trip I went from upstate New York through West Virginia, Kentucky, like I said, Tennessee, then swung back around up the East Coast. Later this summer, I'm going to do another trip looking for freedom, where I'm going to go visit my daughter, granddaughter, and son-in-law in Virginia Beach, and then head south. Probably North Carolina, South Carolina, maybe a little bit of northern Georgia, through Alabama, maybe parts of Mississippi, maybe even the panhandle of Florida, I'm not sure, then swing back around to central Tennessee and then go back home from there. I'll go the opposite direction in a big loop. Talking to people, talk to a lot of people, especially in Kentucky, West Virginia, and Tennessee. I just drove through Delaware. I can tell by the rules and regulations I'm not a big fan of it, and not because President Biden is from there, or that's where he claims he's originally from Scranton, but he's really from Delaware. Maryland, of course, is Maryland with the fake Republican governor. You can tell by the rules when you go to businesses how people treat each other. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir. Wear a mask. You got to park here. You can't do that. They just rule and regulate you to death. And I'll talk about each state as I went across. And at the end, I'm going to give you where I'm going to go, where I'm going to end up. I'll be 65 this November. And to uproot yourself from the town you were born in, raised in, your whole life is in, where you met your wife. I'm divorced now, but the mother of my children, Both of my children were born in upstate New York. They both live out of state. Even my ex lives out of state. She's remarried, lives in the South, Florida, and North Carolina, right above the Georgia border. And everybody I went to high school with, I would say 85%, all left the state. South mostly, some west. Almost everybody I grew up with, and most of my cousins, and I got a whole bunch of cousins here locally in upstate New York. My father had 5 sisters and a brother, and I would say 90% of them are gone from upstate New York. South, west, went to a lot of different places. On my mother's side, many of my cousins are all out of state. All of them on my mother's side are gone from New York. Maybe I'm just a late bloomer. Maybe I'm just a little slower to catch on than most. But I learned a lot about people. It isn't just the government. It's the people, and the people decide who the government is in these states. And that's the brilliancy of the Founding Fathers, that each state is different. Shelby Foote, the famous Civil War historian that wrote the classic History of the Civil War, 3-volume set. And I suggest anybody that doesn't have it, read it. It's really long, and they're big books, but it's amazing history. Said that before the Civil War, the United States we were just a conglomeration of states, basically in a lot of ways separate countries all put together. And after the Civil War, the United States are. And each state is different. Of course, we have a federal government, but each state is different. I think with the loss of freedoms in some of the states I went through in the state that I live in currently, upstate New York, that over time, between rules, regulations, taxes, local, county, state, just ground people into dust that stayed. The ones that want to stick it out like myself, we were just ground. Life is tough enough. But to make it impossible to make a living, plan for your future or your retirement, God forbid, and your children. Everybody wants their children to do better than they did. But what's happened is in New York and in many other deep blue states, that's impossible. It's impossible. And I think over time, 2-3 generations now, that resentment and bitterness, that life is hard, but to make it almost impossible makes you angry, makes you bitter, makes you resentful, let alone financially secure. How about happiness? Forget it. Forget it. And cynical, look at each other as individuals with contempt. Manners, civility is lost, whether a total stranger or friends or family. It's done over time. And I've talked, like I said, to a lot of people, covered over 2,000 miles in my trip on this first trip. And it was a real eye-opener. And on the second trip, I'm going to spend a lot more time and talk to a lot more people, but I talked to plenty. And the differences and the individuals are outstandingly wide. How people treat each other, common courtesy, respect, economics in certain areas. Places are booming, and I'm not going into a lot of detail, but I wanted to give you a heads up. And I've made my decision where I'm going to go. I'm just not going to announce it yet. For those of you who do follow my channel, and those of you that know me here locally, I used to be a city council member. I've made up my mind now. It's not going to be 6 months from now. It's not going to be next week. It's in the next couple of years, probably. But eventually I'm going to go. God willing, that my health and God's plan for me, I believe He put this in my mind to look to be happier and live somewhere where you can be freer and happier. And I'm going to do a lot of talking about that on my trip, what I saw, what I experienced. It was an incredible eye-opener, like I said. So look forward to that. That's coming up in the next few days. A lot of editing's involved, and I'm going to write a script this time, I think, so that way I don't miss any details. But I wanted to let you know it's coming up, and look forward to that. And I think it's going to open up some eyes for a lot of people. Now, not everybody that watches my channel lives in upstate New York, but they might live in a deep blue state, or even a state that's starting to turn blue, like Virginia. There are huge differences. And if you wait until the circumstances are exactly right for you to leave, you'll be waiting your whole life and it'll never happen. Even if you're older like myself, you only get 4, 5, 6 years, maybe 10 years of more freedom and happiness, it's worth it. Like I said, both of my children are out of state. I've got family here, my mother, a brother. But it's time to move on. It's time to take the leap of faith that you're just going to uproot everything you've ever known to look for freedom and happiness. And I hope in the next few episodes we can take that journey and you can decide for yourself what you want to do. That if you're unhappy or unfulfilled where you are, this is a huge, unbelievably magnificent country with opportunities everywhere. If the opportunity isn't where you're at, then do what Americans have done since the founding and even before the founding of this country. Go where the opportunity is. Go where you're freer and go where you're happier. So look forward to those episodes coming up besides my usual political ones. And as I always say, until the next time, goodbye and good luck.